Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each week I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I'm so excited this week to have my friend Tom Spall on with me. Tom, can I tell everybody who you are?
I am Tom Spall. Some people know me on Twitter as Tommy Spall. I am a seventh year instructional technology specialist, and I teach right here in Brenham ISD.
Awesome. Well, Tom, I have so been looking forward to chatting with you. But, whenever I do these conversations, my first question always starts back at the beginning. And that is, when you were a kid, dreaming of what you were going to be when you got older, does it align at all with what you're doing now?
Shockingly, I talked to a lot of teachers about the same question, and it did. I was in. It wasn't until I always wanted to be a writer, but then I found out I'm not a good writer. So it was sixth grade. We had elementary school up to sixth grade, and my teacher was Mrs. Struick in Hudsonville, Michigan, and she was amazing. And she was just one of the best teachers I've ever had in my whole life. And she was just hands-on and engaging and just so fun. And from that class, from sixth grade on, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. So all through junior high and high school, I knew what I wanted to do. I had a passion for working with kids, and especially age. I worked for the YMCA for a little bit, and that guided my path working with students in the before and after school care. And then I went straight into college at the University of Kansas, just knowing that that's what my degree was going to be for elementary education.
So you knew the whole time that it was going to be elementary too. Like you automatically knew that that's where your heart was.
It did. It kind of, when I got to high school, I was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun." I could see myself maybe being a high school teacher, but then a little bit through my high school experience, I went to three different high schools in three different states. Was very well rounded. My family moved around a lot, so I went to high school in Milford, Massachusetts, Fairview Park, Ohio, and Olathe, Kansas, where I ended up
Wow.
graduating. So yeah, and so through that process, I really just enjoyed doing our high school, especially in Olathe. We did like little internships at elementaries around Olathe, Kansas, Overland Park area, and I was just, oh, this is just as cool. I like working with the younger kids and seeing their growth process and being able to mold them and model for them good expectations and stuff. So I really enjoyed working with that. So from that point on, I kind of knew I wanted to go elementary. So I went into the University of Kansas for 2 years for elementary education. And then my family did another move to Oklahoma, where they are now. And I finished up my undergrad degree at the University of Central Oklahoma for elementary education.
Well, you teach, and at some point during your teaching career, you get the bug to kind of take a step into a little bit of a different direction. I always laugh when people ask me, "Do you miss leaving the classroom?" And I'm like, I'm just in a different classroom now. And I know you can attest to the same thing being with the job that you do. So, when did you kind of get that bug and know that, hey, this is a new step that I'm ready to take?
For sure. So when I taught 3 years in Oklahoma City, and on my campus, I was always known as like the tech guy that knew how to integrate technology to this instruction. And I liked going to all the different classrooms and helping them. And I didn't know that could be actually a job. We didn't have up there in Oklahoma City. We didn't have these ITSs or tech people. And then I came down here to Brenham, Texas, and I was just teaching my first year. I met people like Jessica Johnson and Andable and Kim Strauss, who have been amazing influences on my path to go more towards that tech side. So I was like, oh, I can go teach teachers how to integrate technology like I was in my classroom doing PBL and blended learning environments.
Mhm.
I was just like, I was taken aback by that. I was like, wow, that can actually be a job. And I saw how good those three were in their jobs. And I was like, I want to do this. I need to do this. And then I get asked all the time, like, like you did, like, do you miss the classroom? It's like, I didn't really classroom. It's a different role. And like, oh, so you don't teach anymore? I'm like, no. Like, that's all I do. Like, I teach
Yeah.
all day long. I teach teachers how to use technology with a purpose and with valid reasons to be using it in the classroom. So it was a really cool mind shift of teaching students directly. Now I teach the teachers, but I also still get to go into classrooms and I model lessons for the teachers. I work with students every single day, which is a joy because not only do I have my 20 kids in my classroom, but now I have, hundreds and hundreds of kids at the 4 elementaries that I'm in charge of in Brenham IC. So.
Well, I've got to ask, since you're over all this tech stuff, do you have a current favorite tech tool that you're like totally obsessed with, or you're sharing with everyone?
Oh man, I'm wow, that's a tough one because technology is always
I
changing. So
know, I know.
especially now in this pandemic era of teaching and remote learning, there's so many great tools out there that teachers can use. Honestly, I'm just gonna fall back on some of my favorites, and they kind of all start with F. Like I love flippity.net. It's one of my favorite tools because it integrates with Google Sites. Google Sheets, and it's just really easy to use and make lessons for students. I also love Flipgrid because I think having a visual documentation of your students is one of the biggest things you could do. When you take those videos of your kids doing read-ins in the classroom or their math work or projects or presentations for even the kids that don't like to speak up in class, they will speak up on these audio visual clips.
Mhm.
So I think that's extremely powerful, especially in the era of education that we are in now with remote teaching. So even no matter where you are, you could be at home and you can still be recording those videos for your teacher and your peers in your class, and so that's huge. And lastly, I just love Chrome extensions and using
Yeah.
Google for everything. We have been a Google for Education district for 8 years now, going on 9, and it's been the best thing for our district and for our teachers. And my favorite extension right now is Confetti Cannon because it just pops up on your screen and shoots confetti. So it's a great way to celebrate students.
I love that so much. That's so cool. I haven't heard of that one. I'm
I,
totally adding it as soon as we're done.
yes, and I learned that from my buddy Meredith Akers, and on the side from Brendan IC, I also do Fresh Thought EDU with her, and we just have a great partnership and just another way that we can share our stories and work together to share ideas out to our PLN.
I love that. Well, Tom, you are also a husband and a dad of 2, in addition to pets and all the other craziness. And so, I've got to ask the same question I love to ask any parent who's working in a job like we are in education that can be so all-consuming. How do you balance the love for your job and everything else that goes on at home with your family as well?
That's a great question. I have 2 kids. I have an 8-year-old that's in 3rd grade and a 6-year-old that's in 1st grade, and they are just amazing. And I try to spend as much time, like you've seen me on Facebook and Twitter. I just I try to, like, I didn't do a good job of this in my first 3 years of teaching. I wasn't able to compartmentalize, however you say the word, uh, bring it all together. Like when work stopped at 4:30, I was able to stop work. As a
Yeah.
teacher, that's very difficult. Just and say, okay, I'm done. No, like as a teacher, as an educator, and it's so hard to explain this to people that aren't in education. You work all day long and you don't have that time to plan these lessons or to add extra things, or especially try to integrate technology without trying the tool first. So it's hard to do that. But as I grew further in my educational career and as I developed more ways to say, okay, at 4:30, I'm gonna try to get this done within the next half an hour between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. I'm gonna finish everything I have to do here, and then when I go home, my wife and I, we both take our phones, we plug them in, and I try not to touch that or my computer, which is very difficult because I can hear my phone ringing off, and I have teachers contacting me like, oh, I need help, and so it's a balancing act, and it's just I think the best thing you can do is, like, especially when you look at your kids and your family, they come once, and it's like they're here in the now. And every time I see my kids, I'm like, I could be working on this for school, or I could just take my time right now and spend it with my kids. I don't want to have regrets later on in life and be like, well, I was so work driven that I didn't have time to spend with my precious two amazing kids and my wife, like putting all that effort into being a good husband. I
Yeah.
mean, I love my kids, but I also love my wife, and I need to make sure we have time to go on dates and spend that
Mhm.
time together. And again, it's a balance. And she knows when I go into my office at home, like this is my office. It's I give me 20 minutes, give me 30 minutes
Yeah.
here. Let me go take care of this, and then I'll rejoin the family party. So
I love that. Well, Tom, you do a lot of work that with a lot of people, and you're on social media and all these other things. And I know that when we enter those realms and we begin to work with more educators, we begin to see all of the brilliance that surrounds us. And sometimes that can cause us to compare ourselves to them or to doubt our own skill sets. And so I love asking this question on each of my episodes, and that is, what do you do to keep doubt at bay so that way it doesn't take root and control what you do?
one of my downsides in life is self doubt, or just
Yeah.
like not thinking I'm as good, especially in technology. There are so many people that are good at technology. Now they may be good teachers and they may be using technology. They may just need help having a drive or a purpose to their instructional tech integration. So I see, like, it's really hard, especially on social media. I think social media sometimes can be the death of us.
Mhm.
It's just that we see our friends doing great things or sharing all day long. See on Twitter these PLNs and these people that are just doing great things, and I sometimes I do compare myself. It's hard to say I've reached that pinnacle of my career, my success. So instead of trying to be more of a competition, I see it as growth. I see other people doing great things. I'm like, okay, so think of it as I'm going to take that idea and how can I use it in my life? How can I use it with my teachers? How can I use it in my instruction to become the best that I can be? So when someone shares an idea, instead of like I used to be like, oh, I wish I could have thought of that or something like that. Instead of being jealous of the fact, I like to shout them out and be like, man, that's an amazing idea. I didn't think about that. So
Yeah.
how can I bring it into my life and do it? I think that takes a lot of the competition out and brings in more of a I'm celebrating these other people that I work with, that I collaborate with, and I'm sharing what they're doing, but I'm also saying, okay, how can I take that and how can I blend that into my instruction and just constantly grow from there? That's especially relevant when you go to like an ed camp or something. You hear all these great ideas and you're taking down all these notes, or people are coming to your conferences and or your
Mhm.
sessions like, man, how do you keep up with all this? I'm like, well, it's my job to keep up with it
Yeah.
so I can benefit you and other people and benefit myself too. Like I can take these ideas and use it. And speaking of that, I work in a department of 10 people that have constantly grown me and helped
Yeah.
me think of different ways to use technology. I work with two of the best instructional specialists in the state of Texas, Brittany Collick, who is phenomenal, and she works with the high school teachers, and then Troy Kuhn, who works with the middle school and junior high, and my boss, Kim Strauss, who leads our department with such grace and humbleness that it's phenomenal. So I work with them, and I work really good on the elementary campuses, but I couldn't do what they do at the middle school, junior high, and high school. And they have such a way to work with them.
Yeah.
So I love to learn and grow from them. They have great ideas. I'm like, okay, so that was phenomenal. How can I bring that down to the elementary level?
Yeah.
So instead of, it's not, I don't like to look at it anymore as a competition. I like to use it as a how can I better grow myself and how can I learn from them, and hopefully how can they learn from me as well.
Well, there's two things you said there that I think really resonated with me. And the first of all was, of course, that what you said there at the end was we have to stop looking at it as a competition. But the other thing you said that I think really struck me was, you said, I find ways to celebrate the great things others are doing. And I think in our field, especially, that is a huge part that sometimes we get so caught up in so many other things that we forget that piece. But I've often found that on my worst days, when I spend that time where I'm not feeling adequate, when I spend it celebrating the greatness of others, it lifts me up too. And I'm like, okay, duh, this is what we should be doing. This is what brings us together when we spend more time celebrating what
Yes.
others bring to the table instead of so focused on what I perceive as my shortcomings. And so I love that you shared that.
And
Um,
that's not only true in education. And that's the funny thing that I try to look at too. It's like we try to share our stories and celebrate each other in education, which is good and it's
Yeah.
meaningful, especially on social media. But just taking that one perspective that you were just talking about and putting it into our daily lives is huge, especially nowadays. Like, there's so much negativity, and just doing something good for someone else, or like helping like buy something in the grocery store for the person behind you, or a Starbucks drink, or giving a shout out to really needs it on, how often do you get on Facebook and you choose someone and you shout them out on Facebook or Twitter and just saying, I really like this person's personal photography business, or I really like how this person's helping her church, or it's like how often do we do that? But we try to do it every day in education. We just need more uplift, just shouting each other out and saying you're doing a good job, and I'm not jealous of you. I'm not trying to compete with you. I really like what you're doing, and I like learning from you. So.
I love that. Well, Tom, whenever I do these conversations, one way that I always like to close them out is I love to think about us as people and how there's so many things that we hold true to our hearts and our beliefs and who we are and that we want to impress upon others. And so for anybody who is listening or watching this conversation today, if they were to walk away with one thing, what would your one thing be for them?
Oh, wow. Be yourself. That's so cliche. That's so corny, but it's really true. Like, when I'm having my worst day, or I'm thinking negative thoughts, and it's not really negative thoughts about me. It's like how others may perceive me or have these perspectives. I always put down myself. I'm the color codes. I'm very blue. So I think about yeah, I always go home, not thinking of maybe sometimes on how I might have done something wrong. I think about how others perceive me, or have their perspectives about what I'm trying to do. And so the best thing I can do is, and what my wife always tells me, she goes, just be yourself. Just be Tom Spall. Be happy. Stop having putting those burdens on your worries about what other people think of you, and just be honest and be kind and just be a good person. That's why we always tell my kids too. I'm like, well, it's not really what other people think about you. It's like how you see yourself, and just, are you a good person? Do you go to school every day? Are you nice to other people? Are you kind? Do you say nice things? Do you lift other people up? And if they can say yes, like I've done all that today, I've tried to be generous and helpful and kind. Well, then that's it. That's all I want you to do. I want you to go and be a good person in this world and spread joy, spread happiness, and stop worrying about what other people think.
Well, that is the perfect mic drop way to end this conversation. So, Tom, I have been so excited to talk to you. I know we live in the same town, and we never get to see each other. I mean,
we need to get together and have friends and family. You can come hang out with my kids, man.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today, Tom.
No problem. It was wonderful. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your stuff. It's there. I hope today's conversation with Tom has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.